Diplomacy or war? That is the question as the US-Iran head to Oman for a second round of talks tomorrow. But the real story is actually happening in the water. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the world's largest aircraft carrier, has just been ordered to the Middle East to join a massive armada of 15 destroyers and more than 600 Tomahawk missiles. As the IRGC prepares to close the Strait of Hormuz tomorrow and millions march against the regime worldwide, the stage is set for a showdown. Massive rallies were held against the Iranian regime all across the world this weekend. From Munich to Toronto, hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets, waving the Lion and Sun flag. That's the flag Iran had under the Shah, and it has become a symbol of this new revolution. These weren't small demonstrations. Based on public estimates, millions participated all around the world. The message was clear. The world hasn't forgotten Iran, and the world wants regime change. Similar messages are happening inside Iran too. The revolution is still ongoing. We're not seeing the massive street protests that we saw in early January, but we are seeing the resistance continue. Over the past few days, mysterious gas explosions have been happening all across Tehran and other cities. Iranian authorities claim that they are just accidents, but nobody believes them. And on top of this, people are still chanting. Here's the footage from inside Iran just days ago. All of this is the backdrop for the round 2 of negotiations happening tomorrow. Iranian state media just confirmed on Tuesday, February 17th, the US and Iran will meet in Oman again. But here's the strange part. These are indirect talks. Both sides will be in the same building, but they will not be talking to each other directly. That's the Iranian condition. They refuse to be in the same room as Americans. So here's how it's gonna work. Iran talks to the Omani foreign minister, then the foreign minister walks to a second room, then the Americans respond, and he walks back to the Iranian room and tells them what the Americans just said. This may sound funny, but 8 hours of this happened last time. And according to Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, two people representing the US in these negotiations, a nuclear deal with Iran is difficult to impossible. That's not an encouraging range. Here's Secretary of State Marco Rubio explaining why a deal with Iran's leadership is so difficult to agree on.
Let me go first on your question. I'm not going to talk about attacks on Iran or anything of that nature because the president's made clear he prefers diplomacy and an outcome of negotiated settlement. Now, we're dealing with radical Shia clerics. Okay, we're dealing with people who make geopolitical decisions on the basis of pure theology, and it's a complicated thing. I mean, no one's ever been able to do a successful deal with Iran, but we're going to try. Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner will be traveling. I think they're traveling right now to have important meetings, and we'll see how that turns out. And we'll always comply with the applicable laws of the United States in terms of involving Congress in any decisions. But right now, we're not talking about any of that. We are postured in the region for one simple reason, and that is that we understand that there could be threats to our forces in the region. We've seen them be threatened in the past, and we want to make sure that we have sufficient capacity to defend them if, God forbid, that were to happen. We'll follow whatever the law is on it, and it depends on the circumstance that lead to it. But right now, we're talking about negotiations. We are focused on negotiations. That's what we're focused. The president's made that clear. If that changes, it'll be obvious to everyone, and obviously, whatever the law requires us to do, we'll do.
And of course, there's another player whose interest must be addressed, and that is Israel. Prime Minister Netanyahu has been clear. Any nuclear deal must also address Iran's ballistic missile program. You see, during the 12-day war, Iranian missiles hit Israeli territory, and Israel wants that capability eliminated. Netanyahu just met with President Trump, and here's what he's demanding from the deal.
But I said that if a deal is to be reached, it should have several components that we believe are important not only for the security of Israel, but for the security of the world, the United States, the region, the world. The first is that all enriched material has to leave Iran. The second is that there shall be no enrichment capability, not stopping the enrichment process, but dismantle the equipment and the infrastructure that allows you to enrich in the first place. And the third is to deal also with the questions of ballistic missiles. There's an MTCR limitation of 300 kilometers, and Iran is supposed to adhere to it. Of course it doesn't, as the Rising Lion operation by itself manifested. Everybody knows that. And the fourth is dismantle the axis of terror that Iran has built. It's been smashed, but it's still there. It's trying to recover, as Iran itself is trying to do. And the last thing is, remember Ronald Reagan's dictum vis-a-vis the Soviet Union? Trust but verify, distrust, distrust, and always verify. So there has to be real inspections, substantive inspections, no lead time inspections, but effective inspections for all of the above.
Netanyahu wants four things: end Iran's nuclear program, dismantle the ballistic missile program, cut off all proxy groups, and stop internal repression. Iran has rejected most of these. The gap between what US and Israel want versus what Iran will accept is enormous. And you can tell that both sides expect the talks to fail because of what they are doing militarily. IRGC just announced that they will be holding a large-scale naval exercise in the Strait of Hormuz tomorrow. This is right when the negotiations start. This is not subtle, it's a message, maybe even a threat. If the US strikes Iran, Iran will disrupt the strait. 20% of world's oil passes through the choke point and the oil markets would go in chaos. Now, to be fair, the United States is also making preparations of its own, and they are massive. 2 days ago, President Trump announced that the USS Gerald R. Ford is heading to the Middle East. This is the world's largest aircraft carrier, and it's the same one that was used in the capture of Nicolas Maduro. Here's more details.
The talks resuming with Iran Tuesday, this time in Geneva. Trump has dispatched a second aircraft carrier to the region, the USS Gerald R. Ford.
In case we don't make a deal, we'll need it. If we don't have a deal, we'll need it.
Leading Trump's delegation in Munich, Secretary of State Marco Rubio received a standing ovation for giving what some called a reassuring message to European allies.
Now, the biggest aircraft carrier going to the region is definitely a big deal. But if we dig deeper, we realize that the US Armada in the region is actually gigantic. Let me show you what I mean. On your screen, you can see what the US now has in the region. This includes air and navy assets, and the assets span from the Indian Ocean to the Atlantic. Here's the breakdown. 2 aircraft carriers, 15 destroyers, which total up to roughly 33% or 1/3 of the deployed US Navy fleet, just in this picture. This also includes more than 600 Tomahawk missiles. This armada serves 2 purposes. First, leverage. When you negotiate with an aircraft carrier right behind you, your words carry more weight. And second, of course, options. If talks fail, which seems more likely than not, the US has everything in position to act. Now, here's something interesting that's happening at the nuclear sites the US attacked during Operation Midnight Hammer last year. The satellite imagery shows that Iran is covering up the nuclear site in Isfahan. They are building structures over it and sealing it off. Now, the Iranian explanation for this is that they claim there are unexploded Tomahawk missiles inside, and that's why they say it would be unsafe for UN inspectors to enter the site and check for everything. The missile could explode at any time if it's moved. Now, as you guys know, Iran truly cares about human lives, after everything they just did in January. But nonetheless, is what they are claiming true? Well, we actually have no idea because no one can go inside. Now, it is possible that a Tomahawk missile failed to detonate, but the timing of this information being made public is kinda suspicious. You see, in the negotiations, the US is pushing for UN inspectors to go into these sites and verify if they were destroyed properly. And suddenly, Iran says that inspectors cannot go in because there's an unexploded American bomb inside. Very, very convenient. And as we have covered extensively, Iran has a habit of lying. This could be legitimate safety concern, or it could be just a cover to hide whatever is ongoing inside the nuclear site. Now, another thing that's important to point out here is that Isfahan is one of the 3 sites where US did not use the bunker busters. They did not use the GBU bomb. Instead, they used the Tomahawk missiles, which were launched from a submarine. So the GBUs probably worked because Iran is not claiming that those sites have any unexploded, ordnance inside them. Now, since we are talking about Operation Midnight Hammer, here's something interesting that we just learned yesterday, and it shows us how modern warfare has changed so much. Next up, we have US Air Force Major Claire Randolph. She's the Chief of Weapons and Tactics, and she just talked about the challenges of maintaining operational security in the age of social media. She talks about how one of the bigger problems right now is random people on Twitter tracking US military movements in real time and just publishing it for everyone to see. Take a listen.
I mean, you've got Twitter feeds of randos that are just studying where our airplanes go and publishing it, consolidating it. Like, if U.S. analysts did some of that, we would consider it secret or maybe even top secret. But that stuff is just allowed on the open internet. So operational security, especially when you're talking about a transnational movement with hundreds of aircraft, is really, really difficult to conceal. So OPSEC is a really big concern. I think. And actually reading a recent article about the 35th anniversary of Desert Storm, it's funny that this one is the same.
Now, to be fair, these Twitter randos are using open source data. They're using flight tracking websites and publicly available data. And it's important to point out that if amateur analysts can figure this out, Russia, China, and even Iran can figure this out too. They don't need Twitter. But the fact that the US military has to now factor in social media into top secret missile planning, well, that tells us something. And the military does adapt. If you guys remember the details of Operation Midnight Hammer, then you remember that about 6 B-2 bombers went west, heading towards what everyone assumed was Diego Garcia or maybe even Guam. But the real strike package actually went east that no one actually paid attention to. That was the one that delivered the bunker busters to the underground Iranian sites.